Welcome to the special regular meeting, Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. We'll begin with roll call.
Councilmember Brookover.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
Here.
Mayor Bacon.
Present. Next up, I'll move approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next up, communication from the audience. If you're going to communicate, please fill out one of the blue forms, and when you approach the microphone, please state your first and last name for the record. You'll have 5 minutes. All right, seeing none. In the online queue?
I have a caller in the queue. Caller with the number ending in 954, you're welcome to address council.
Hello, good evening. This is Nicole Vibert. Even though it's not on the agenda, I just wanted to call in briefly to congratulate and thank the DEI Director of East Lansing, Elaine Hardy, for the beautiful work she did, and the entire commission for the Martin Luther King celebration yesterday at Lansing Center. My daughter and I and my fellow Indigenous friends in the community are very honored to be there, and it was just so inspiring. And we always listen as a family to his speeches throughout the year, but always, many in a row during the holiday weekend, and it was just even further edifying to be present with so many who are carrying on the courage that he displayed, and even when things aren't popular, it stood out to me to the importance of carrying forth. So again, thanking Elaine, congratulations. It was great to have our mayor avail himself so well with a lot of big names called to the stage. I thought that speech stood out very nicely. And just everyone in Michigan, I think we really show ourselves to be brave and determined to lead with heart. So, miigwech.
Thank you. You can leave it there.
Just leave it there. Hello, my name is Mark Breedlove. I live in East Lansing, and I just wanted to make sure the council was aware. I became aware shortly after the new year that there'd been an ad placed in the Lansing State Journal in the classified section sometime between Christmas and New Year's, when almost no one reads papers, that a 40-foot tower was going to be established in front of my house. I know it's to be in front of my house because it listed the address as 414 South Lawn, where I live. And when I came home from being out of town, I was kind of surprised to see that no one had written to me to say they were going to put a 40-foot tower in front of my home. And it's not like they didn't have my address because they published it in the paper. And so I have lots of questions about this process of how these decisions were made. Apparently this is going to be a 5G tower. I'm surmising that. The ad didn't tell me what it's for except for telecommunications. And so I really feel like, it appears that at least some folks in the city knew about this over a year ago, that the eventual plan is to have 50 of these towers in front of presumably other people's homes, although the company that's putting them in doesn't seem to have told us where they're going to be, just a couple at a time, which I think is also intended to kind of catch people unawares. And so I have lots of questions about that process, and if the city knew about it a year ago, why weren't any of the residents told that this was going on? I also have a question as to who this is to benefit. I've talked to quite a few of my neighbors, many of whom are here. We're perfectly happy with our internet service and cell phone service, so what is the compelling public need for a 40-foot tower in front of my house? And why is the tower being put in front of any house as opposed to any of the many traffic islands that are around? And so I'd really like, I hope that the council will eventually address how this happened without any of the residents being told, and whether there's any opportunity to regulate decisions about where the towers would go. We live there. Shouldn't we have a voice in where exactly they go and exactly how many there are? And shouldn't we at least be informed what, if anything, they're intended to do? As far as we can tell, they won't benefit anyone except the company that's installing them, that will then lease out bandwidth on the towers to telecommunications companies. Which telecommunication companies? I don't know. Who would bother to tell the people who actually live there what the tower's for? Apparently not Crown Capital, the folks that say they're putting it in. So I think there are quite a few of us that are really upset that we were not informed, we're not given a voice, and it's not clear that anyone's going to listen to us now. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Peter Dewan. I live at 602 North Lawn in East Lansing in Glen I too am rising to raise concerns, hopefully, of the council with regard to the installation of 5G towers. Like the last speaker, this is coming at the Glen neighborhood completely by surprise. I'm told that there are somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 60 towers that are going to be installed. I don't think anyone in the Glen neighborhood, which constitutes probably about 1,200 families, is in support of this. There's no rising opposition to not having adequate service, and the question becomes, what is the public good, and how is anyone benefiting from this? It certainly is going to have a very adversarial effect on our property values. And I would hope that the city would be an advocate on behalf of its residents and try to do everything possible. We're not trying to limit the advancement of technology, but we clearly don't want to have eyesores throughout our neighborhood. So we should be looking at public parks, we should be looking at City Hall, we should be looking at the Hannah Center as places where these towers could be located just as much as they could be in public easements throughout the neighborhood. And I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you.
There is another caller in the queue if you're ready.
Ready?
Go. Caller with the name Overall, you're welcome to address council. Caller, you may need to unmute your phone. Okay.
All right. Next up at the podium.
Hello, my name is Leo Sell. I'm actually going to talk to two items on the agenda after hearing those prior comments. Regarding the 5G towers, I probably have a different point of view because I am in what I call the red-headed stepchild district of the Bailey neighborhood. I'm in the Avondale eastern portion of the city, and frankly, the cell phone coverage there in that neighborhood has been abysmal for all of the years that I've lived there. So anything that might improve it is something that I'm going to be supportive of. Regarding the separation agreement and the interim hiring of a city manager, that was an interesting thing to run into today in the news, as it's rather a surprise to the community. I don't know how much freedom the council will feel to speak to any of the underlying reasons or the untold story as to why the present city manager would need to leave the position. It may be justifiable. I don't have any way to have any opinion. I don't have any knowledge. And then as far as the interim person, I don't have any knowledge of Mr. Talaferro either, other than his long service to the city as fire chief sometime back. So I would encourage the council to perhaps speak to those sorts of things. The fellow might be quite qualified. I just don't know, but I did see a little more information, thanks to East Lansing Information, about some of the recent changes in leadership or loss of leadership in the city over the last several months. And having just recently lost the assistant city manager, if I got the timing right, it looks like the head of human resources is open. 2 or 3 others that I'm not pulling directly out of my memory because I only scanned the article. But that seems like an awful lot of leadership vacuum and problem. So I guess I would wrap up by also encouraging you to speak to what the long-term intention is relative to hiring an interim city manager and making sure the business of the city is done well and properly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Preisler. I live at 515 South Lawn. And I have a letter that we sent to the council on Sunday in the interest of conveying the questions that we had because we started to kind of unravel this as neighbors when we first found out. And in the unraveling, it became clear that maybe the council wasn't even necessarily aware, and we didn't want to presume that and didn't want you to have to do some of the legwork that we had that helped us arrive at some of our questions. So the letter says, Dear City Council, this letter is from the East Lansing residents identified below. We appreciate that the City Council set up an agenda for January 17th to discuss the proposal presented by Crown Castle for 5G cell towers throughout Chesterfield Heights, Glen Karen, and Bailey neighborhoods. The process to date has been unsatisfactory, and we present our thoughts below in hopes that we can improve it going forward. We have concerns with this proposal, which includes 50-plus private for-profit cell towers being placed in locations that seem to include, in many cases, installations in people's front yards. We note that this is merely phase 1 with expansion to come. Some or all are 40 feet high with large circumferences, so this would be a significant impact on our shared landscape. As an aside from this letter, what we've learned is that once the towers are placed, the limitations of the statute don't actually prevent the expansion, so the towers are able to get higher or get a wider base once the initial infrastructure is installed. We would also like to highlight that there seems to be a misnomer in recent press that the city has little power in the face of this proposal. We believe this to be erroneous. In fact, after speaking with experts on the issue, we have come to understand that municipalities may heavily influence the terms under which 5G will come to their towns and that the city can protect its landscape and neighborhoods. With this in mind, we are writing to ask for your help to make sure we achieve the best outcome for our city by carefully considering input from residents, experts on the topic, and other communities' experiences. We request that the city leverage expertise and legal counsel to advocate for the interests of our city's residents, see Michigan Coalition to protect public rights-of-way. We request that the city includes our residents' input in this 5G process, and we request that the city protect our neighborhood's aesthetics, property values, and the health and safety of our residents. As we've sought information on the topic from Crown Castle and other publicly available sources, we have a list of open questions that we hope to have answered during the public meeting and or the coming weeks as you have the opportunity to learn more on this topic. Questions. 1, on December 27th, Crown Castle published 2 notices in the LSJ announcing 2 proposed towers at 414 South Lawn and 670 Lexington, and that, quote, specific information is available by calling, unquote, Crown Castle within 30 days. We have received little specific information in response to our calls and written requests to Crown Castle. What are the consequences of the 30-day time period? Number 2, what has transpired between the city and Crown Castle as of today? Number 3, has the city consulted with any legal experts regarding our city's rights in this process, including by communicating with Michigan Coalition to protect public rights of way. This coalition was formed to protect municipalities' rights to determine the infrastructure footprint in their communities. Number 4, the Crown Castle Fiber LLC document package contains an email from George Lahanis on 8 April 2022 stating an okay to approve in response to Crown Castle's request for exception to the city's insurance requirements, namely that insurance providers have a rating of insurers of A+, and that insurance coverages carry a deductible of $50K or less. Our questions: under what authority did George Lahanis act in approving these exceptions? Under what circumstances, if any, is email approval permitted under the city code? Would it be appropriate to waive insurance requirements for a private company installing heavy-duty infrastructure into residence yards and sidewalk areas? Number 5, has the city or will it seek alternative proposals from other companies? Number 6, is the City Council aware of studies referenced by the National Association of Realtors that the effect of installing a cell phone tower on the property is worst in line of sight of a tower and still significant in the neighborhood beyond? 7, can we be provided with the specific locations of the, can we be provided with specifications of the proposal, exact locations on each property, and what the cell towers look like, including dimensions, color, et cetera? Also, what RF frequencies and wattages and expected broadcast radius will be admitted? Number 8, what are the criteria for cell tower placement and how are these particular addresses chosen? Number 9, what does the city's master plan suggest for infrastructure, new and
30 seconds
existing?
remaining.
Number 10, what is the carbon footprint of these cell towers and what's the impact on the environment? Number 11, who are these towers meant to benefit? Number 12, what's the project timeline? And then it's signed by a lot of people, and then a lot more people signed it after we submitted it, so I can send you guys an updated copy. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment? They're trickling.
Sorry, I would have brought an easel with some PowerPoints and things like that. I didn't do that. My name is Brian Loomis. I'm at 404 South Lawn. Also a concerned individual with the 5G antennas. I wanted to add into the record, I guess to second some of the statements on what the value assessment of this was going to be. It seems like this decision was sort of put in place at the request of the telephone companies and the folks installing the equipment without much of a needs assessment done of the folks that are going to be affected. So I can only speak from the data from the side of Glencairn that I live on. I'll give you some numbers here just as a rough order of magnitude. Metrocom and Lightspeed give us about 166 megabits per second, which sounds like an awful lot. T-Mobile's current 4G LTE system on your cell phone is about 3, so that's an order of magnitude below. The current 5G service that we have from cell towers on 127 and 96 is about 222, so a little bit improved from what we have right now with Lightspeed. So unless there's something from an engineering perspective that makes this new 5G system orders of magnitude better than the 5G that's in place right now, the side of Glencairn that we're on has effectively the same service, and we're not adding additional requirements on the homeowners to buy new TVs or new routers or whatever it happens to be, or buy new service from the carriers. So I just wanted to enter some numbers in the record there to show that just a back of the envelope estimate of what the value of this is pretty negligible. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Public comment?
Would you like me to try the caller again?
Yes, please.
Caller with the last name Overall, you're welcome to address council. They've left the queue.
Thank you. Communication from council. Councilperson Brookover.
No, thank you.
Councilperson Watson.
No, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Gregg.
I wanted to echo our caller's congratulations to our DEI Director, Elaine Hardy, and her colleagues on the Mid-Michigan MLK Commission. I was privileged to attend the luncheon at the Lansing Center this Monday, MLK Day. I think Martin Luther King Day is an interesting holiday in that it recognizes someone that dedicated their life to public service and lost their life in that pursuit as well, violently. And it doesn't, to me, seem appropriate to celebrate that holiday in a leisurely fashion that we might for other holidays. I think it's a holiday of service, it's a holiday of community, and I certainly felt very connected and inspired by the community at the Lansing Center during that celebration. I believe that the speech was broadcast. I think you can still catch it on YouTube if you weren't able to catch it live, and I highly recommend that you do that. Mr. Fred Gray was a very inspiring speaker. And the sentiment really that I was left with is the sense that learning significant moments in history, such as the Montgomery bus boycotts, from a textbook leaves you with kind of a removed feeling of reading about characters in a book who seem perhaps almost fictional in their removal from our everyday life. And hearing him talk about the speed that the organizers responded to the call, the level of community and collaboration that went into very quickly establishing that protest with essentially no notice and 48-hour timeline, and realizing that the people in that room were, for the most part, young, for the most part, inexperienced, and then to have that action echo to us down the timeline is quite inspiring, and led me to ask myself what I should be doing, what I could have done already, and certainly to look for ways to move my community in a positive direction. So it was very inspiring. It was very lovely to be back in person at the Lansing Center for that event.
Thank you. To address the big questions, having sat in this seat and talked to many members of the city that I trust, and will talk to all the members of the city I trust, I understand the magnitude of change, and even the consideration of change and what it elicits inside of an organization, positive, negative, or neutral. Inside of our brains, bodies, they don't know the difference of what that change is going to bring. It's just uncertainty and a degree of trepidation and fear of the way forward. I would commit that this council, regardless of how the actions go forward here and in consideration of those actions, we will find the way forward. On the personal side of that, I will take conversations with any individuals at any level of the organization that want to have a conversation. I will not speak directly to any of the legal portions of it, and during that portion you'll hear very little from me on that side of it. But for my personal opinion and personal consideration of any change of it, if you know my personality, it's a long, drawn-out consideration. It's an agonizing consideration based on the types of, even through the last couple years of service, that the degree and the gravity of the things that we've dealt with here as a city. I've taken them all very serious. Sat in many meetings and took many tough questions on those things. But I will, in no uncertain terms to any members of the media and otherwise, there's nothing disparaging or anything going on with the relationship or anything that would, other than direction and some things that, the direction of things and what we want to see done and things along that around. There was nothing bad or anything out there. You're not going to find scandal. There's nothing out there like that that creates the necessity for this. And I want to iterate that and reiterate it from that perspective, because I don't even want that being a perception. Even the attempting nature, everything that we do here is in front of a public body. That's what we all signed up for. That's what the individual who sits in that seat signs up for, and it's tough. It's a tough seat to sit in. But we will, even the nature of this agreement, an attempted agreement, was out of respect for the position, for the role, for whoever else is going to sit in that role, and the city manager departing that role. there's a great deal of respect from this council and from the city for the individual in that role, and that's even part of the nature of trying to do whatever parts and create a really systematic and fair path forward. So just understanding that, and just understanding my nature, I'll talk to anyone in the city. I will be talking to everyone at all levels who's willing to talk, definitely talking to our leadership. And I do understand, my mind works a little bit different. I understand people come into municipalities for the stability and the nature of the work and kind of keeping your head down and doing the work. And we will get back to doing the work, but we've had several challenges over the past few years that haven't allowed us to always just do the work, and we've gotten through all of those. And we'll get through this one as well, through this decision-making process and through everything that we face here, because we face some things, and as I said, change affects you inside of your body. This is affecting me just like some of the more catastrophic events that we've gone through. So just know that's from my personal side. But moving forward, when we switch gears here, I will move into the item, and we'll get going on item 6.1, consideration of separation agreement with the city manager. And what I'll do at this time, I'll raise the motion. Motion to approve the separation agreement as attached to the agenda item and authorize the mayor, I'm assuming, I think this might be a misspelling, is it execute? Yeah, with that change, striking executive and putting in execute. I'll look for a second.
Second.
Discussion?
I wanted to echo the mayor's sentiments. I'm sure the people that sit on this side of the table were becoming used to having our motives questioned. That's the nature of being a politician in America right now. I think everyone is always looking for the information behind the decision. And I would encourage everyone to squash that tendency if possible. I know it's not always possible, but this truly is a reflection of just a desire to go in a different direction. I don't want to let this go by without praising the job that Mr. Lahanas has done for the city. I think that he is really, in many ways, going out on top. He inherited some pretty significant complications from when he moved into this position. We have obviously a high level of debt on some of the Evergreen properties. That's been a consistent problem during his administration. We had pretty major financial complications with our pension agreements, which we are in a much better position now after his leadership. And I don't want to let him go without expressing my gratitude for the opportunity to work with him over the last 3 years that I've served on this council, and communicating that he should be justifiably proud of the work that he's done over his 25-year service in East Lansing. This is not a reflection of any malfeasance or any mismanagement, and wherever he ends up in his next community, they will have a strong manager, and we'll be lucky to have him.
Thank you.
I'm going to reluctantly vote for this motion because the city manager has approved it.
Thank you. Councilperson Watson?
No comment.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-1. Next up, item 6.2, consideration of interim city manager employment contract. And I'll lead in. To kind of give the question from the audience, my kind of direction here in looking at this role to guide us kind of to and bridge us to the future city manager in the consideration of Randy Telefero is based upon primarily the budget season that we're coming into. A lot of the emphasis, my emphasis in the budget season will be on public safety in that area moving forward. So a person with experience in public safety and through 3 separate municipalities, as well as running working with two municipalities at one time with large budgets. So the budget consideration was my primary consideration in thinking of this individual, and also consideration of public safety apparatus and things and work that we want to be doing there in that area. Those are my two primary considerations, as well as an understanding of the general culture makeup of our departments, to not lose continuity in any way, while we seek through this process, and to steady the ship a little bit as we work our way through this process and try to make a head-filled and heart-filled decision on who sits in that seat based on the direction that we'd like to go in, and some of the things we like to get accomplished. So this was it was really, in my mind, the primary considerations, and definitely making sure to secure the public safety apparatus moving forward.
Mayor, since we did publish this agenda, I just wanted to give the council an update that I did just recently receive the signed copy from Mr. Talafaro, and he also filled in the effective date as February 13th, 2023.
Thank you.
I move approval of the interim city manager employment agreement as attached to this agenda, and authorize the mayor to execute.
Second. Discussion.
Well, I'm fine with Mr. Talafaro. But I'm trying to figure out who's going to be city manager starting tomorrow morning. And I'd ask the city attorney, is there some guidance in our resolutions or the city charter about who would actually be the person in charge during this interregnum between, well, I guess now and the date in February when Mr. Talafaro could come on board?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman. So I did work with the city clerk. The last time that the city manager updated the succession plan is allowed by the charter, which it does allow him to appoint a deputy as well as acting city managers. It was completed on June 27th, 2022, and the succession plan is subsequent to the city manager. It would be the deputy city manager, Tom Fehrenbach. So he would become the city manager effective tomorrow. As you know, his last day is Friday, and so that'll be a short appointment. Subsequent, the next position is the chief of police. So Chief Johnson would become the acting city manager effective Monday.
So I'd like to make a friendly amendment that the motion be amended. I think the motion as it is right now says, so indulge me, motion to approve the interim city manager employment agreement as attached to this agenda item and authorize the mayor to execute. And I'd like to add to that or amend the motion that, and in the interval until the interim city manager assumes office, that the city will follow. Is there a resolution number on that? Is there a number on that?
This was created by the city manager under his authority under the charter, so it's a memorandum dated June 27, 2022, titled Deputy City Manager and Acting City Manager Designations.
What he just said.
I'll accept that friendly amendment. You're the second, you also have to accept it.
I accept the amendment. Further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Next up, item 6.3, City Council deliberation and potential action for City Council vacancy appointment.
Congratulations, Chief. Don't ever say I didn't do you a big, big favor.
Thank you.
Okay? Yeah, you're rocking with it now.
Everyone in East Lansing has 2 jobs in the city. But I want to just thank all the members of who participated in the interview process. It was made very difficult honestly, and I came into that meeting with every thought of working through the applicants and making a decision on that day, but the applicants made it far too difficult and sent us all home with a lot more to think about and consider, because all their resumes and just the way they presented and yeah, themselves and their goals for the city are all, there was stretch goals, there was things to do right now. There was something in everyone's work that I just appreciate and respect, and frankly, every one of those individuals is someone that I, in their area of expertise that I talk to. We have small business, we have the environment, we have the neighborhoods, we had everything represented there, and these are individuals that I seek guidance from already when making decisions, and they're just pillars of this community. I just want to thank them for stepping forward, as well as the other 14 applicants and even the 2 people who were out of district who tried to get in, and that's just how this area is when it comes time to participate and step forward and for action. And I just appreciate you and thank you so much, because I know the difficulty of that, as well as doing a public interview. I can't imagine anything much more difficult. Our interview with myself and Councilperson Watson were virtual. And that field had 23 people in it, and virtual was even difficult. So I can imagine sitting there publicly and doing an interview process. It takes a great degree of, I don't know what to call it. It's incredible. But thank you for it. I think we were going to look to, as far as process goes, do people want to kind of say their top 3 and their top candidate, or move through it like that?
I'm ready to proceed. I was ready to proceed on Saturday, so I move that we appoint Dan Bowman to the City Council vacancy.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none. Discussion.
I had a different order of people I was interested in appointing, so should I just vote, or should we talk about like our top 3 picks?
We can vote this motion and deliberate if they don't match.
We can discuss with the motion on the table. If we decide to not vote on this, we should withdraw that motion, but we can talk about anything that we want to with it on the motion, or with it on the table, sorry.
Yeah, you're up.
Yeah, so I campaigned with Mr. Bowman, and I also was on Planning Commission with Mr. Bowman, and he is incredibly kind and is incredibly knowledgeable and very helpful. And I hope to sit beside him and work beside him in the future. And as far as this 9-month appointment went for me, though, my top pick was Garcia, and my second pick was Biber, and my third pick was Bowman. And should I talk more about my picks, or just do we just kind of vote now? Mr. Garcia was with the Independent Study Committee, as well as with our Independent Police Oversight Commission. And there's been a lot of friction, and I feel like our police are trying to walk back towards us, and I would like to be able to walk back towards the police as a city council. And I think that Mr. Garcia offers that presence where there's comfort with what he has done, and then perhaps more bridges can be created during this 9-month time frame. And as far as my choice of Biber, I love the perspective that she presents, and she's very intelligent, and I think that she opens our eyes and our community's eyes to things that maybe we don't always think about, but should think about. And so I thought that her presence on council with us for that period of time would be beneficial to the work that we do.
And I'll speak to my list as well. I led with Garcia as well, and it was for similar reasons. In the short term, my primary responsibility with growth and everything else is that we have safe and productive growth. And once again, my mind is leaning towards spring, summer. All I can see is football season coming crashing towards us and all those things. So public safety is coming into full focus for me. I think we've gotten a break a little bit here through the winter season to offer us an opportunity to have those conversations. And I know what Chief and Chad and the team are doing to get prepared for that, along with fire and EMS and everything else. But I know what's out there, and something he said in the interview was a word, boldness, and that stuck with me. I think that's the approach. Where nothing's off the table. We're regardless of how we look at it, we're going to grow, and I think that growth has to be managed through public health and safety moving forward, and that's just the reality, because we will continue to grow. Every project that's on the table will grow again. How we grow will be determined, but growth is on the horizon. There's no way around it. So we have to make sure we find a way forward with that public safety apparatus and make sure it's matching the level of growth and it's supported, and just many of the things and initiatives that they had done, both with Lansing Police and the work that we're doing here, sat with me through the weekend. Many members on this list were close. I really had a difficult time coming to 3. They're very close. Dr. Biber's opinions on the environment and other things are actually absolutely correct, and she's always absolutely correct with what she's telling me in that area. And and I mentioned the same thing. I also have been a supporter of Dan Bowman and support many of the long-term visions, and I feel he will, as someone on this council at some point here in the cycle, help us with those long-term goals around zoning. But I don't think that in the next 9 months, I'm not sure that's the most pressing issue that's facing us moving forward here. And obviously coming into budget season and everything else, like I said, my priority is public safety moving through the budget season, along with kind of just the nuts and bolts of how the city works. So from that perspective, my selection was Mr. Garcia.
So echoing what my fellow council members have said, this is a really difficult decision. I think any one of the 5 people that we interviewed could easily be a contributory member of this body. My first choice is Dan Bowman. So unfortunately, this is the 3rd time I've had the opportunity to participate in one of these appointments. And so I have developed my own process for deciding who to appoint, because I've had the opportunity to practice, which is that I look at the body and I ask what we're missing. And I think Dan has a huge amount of experience working within some of the most complicated parts of our city. He is no longer the chair of our planning commission. He stepped down from that role, but he served ably in that capacity for many years. And his contributions on that body, I think, definitely led to stronger developments downtown. Both of all 3 actually, of the large high-rise buildings that have been built in the last, it's like 5 years now. That's crazy. Were made better because of his feedback and contribution on that body, and I think that's directly contributed to the vibrancy downtown and the growth of East Lansing. Mr. Garcia was my second choice for the same reasons that Mr. Bacon called out. I think the other difficult thing about making these appointments is that I personally look to our commissions, and so I expect to see in that list of applicants people that are currently serving in our commissions. Each of the 4 applicants that we interviewed are currently contributing on the bodies that they're serving on, and appointing them to council, unfortunately, means that we lose them as part of our commissions. And I've been a member of our commissions, but I don't think it was until I got on this side of the table that I really realized how much of the very significant work of our city happens at the commission level. Many of our policies originate with those volunteer boards, and losing people from those boards that are strong members, strong voices, have high level of expertise in their area is a very difficult decision to make. My personal preference, and the reason that Mr. Garcia is not my first choice, is that I do not want to lose his presence on our police oversight board. When we interviewed him and asked if there was a board that he'd like to serve on, he expressed that he would like to continue to be a part of that body. I know Mr. Bacon and Councilmember Watson both currently serve in that capacity, and I'm not sure either one of them is interested in giving it up. I'm not going to ask them right now, but I think that his presence on that board has been a steadying presence on a board that has experienced some level of friction just because it is new and it's heavily watched. And I know that our public safety has some nervousness about the motives of people who serve on that board. I'm hoping that as we move forward, those will prove not to be founded. But I think that Mr. Garcia is definitely part of that healing with that board and our officers. So for that reason, my preference would be Dan Bowman, although Mr. Garcia is my second choice.
You know, I'm going to look for a nod. I can see another member. I'm going to speak to the other two people who went through the interview process, and I see Mike Emanuel in the. Can I speak to your? Give me a nod if I can speak on you. I'm going to speak. I'm going to. This individual was in the same election cycle with me. Coming out of the election cycle, it was a friendly election cycle, and this is an individual who genuinely came into the fray just to help, and said, how can I help and what can I do? And post-election, one of my first phone calls in humility was from Mike Emanuel. Before post-election, I said, what do I want to get prepared? I want to start being a part of this. I want to learn how the city operates. I said, parks. I said, parks is a good place to start. And he said, I'm on it. Before I don't think we got off the phone, his application was in parks. He's like, what else? What's next? Emerging leaders. Work through the emerging leaders process. What's next? Get out and learn what's going on. He has many small business contacts and has just done all these things, prioritizing policing, housing, the environment and things he said. I'm like, this is for the humility to ask, like, how do I move forward in this? My only desire is to be a part of something and part of one of these bodies and to help, and then to actually follow through and do the steps. I have to acknowledge that and ask you to continue to keep pressing and keep pushing into this space and these spaces and keep working. Because regardless, I know what coming out of these situations, it feels like maybe it's not working, it's working. So keep doing it. And with that level of humility, you really can't fail, because it seems like you're not going to stop coming forward. So keep going. And I thank you. And as far as it goes with Abby Takaki, she could be on any list that I have for anything, her help in neighborhoods and understanding and responsiveness to crisis on any level. She's the first person to show up for anything, particularly in her neighborhood or really any other neighborhood, or to organize or to do something. She brings her entire family along. I want to tell her that I appreciate her, and her qualifications are immense. And what I said in the interview process I'm reading through, I could literally take any one of us off or multiples of us off of this council and place any of these individuals, and they'd be just fine in this body. So it just, once again, it's just the impressive nature of the people who live in East Lansing and came forward for these roles. So I even had to acknowledge the people who didn't make it to this final consideration and deliberation. It's not because of your effort. It's just the quality of this field, and frankly, with 9 months to go, it's the needs of the city and of council moving forward. Nothing to do with your qualifications whatsoever. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
So do you have a seconded motion on the table that we need to clear, or?
There's this weird thing when you have an even number, I can count.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're sitting at 2-2. Did we vote on this motion?
It would get it off the table to vote on it, so.
Okay. All right. Motion on the table for Dan Bowman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right. I'll make a motion, looking for a second, for Mr. Noel Garcia for the 5th seat on City Council. And look for a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
Can you all remind me for the study committee, who was council liaison?
Me.
Or was it yourself? Okay.
So to the initial question, I'm sorry, just to take, I've been doing that police parts for a long time. If he has a real interest in that, yes, I would welcome him to do some of it as well. But and I will say on that, I'm saying I'll pass back to you,
Oh, yeah, thank
Councilperson
you.
Watson. I just
Yeah.
didn't want to forget from Mayor Pro Tem. That really is why I wanted him in. He was really a stabilizing force when we were going through some crisis and involved in trying to work through our police-involved shooting. Really him sending out the memorandum and really a call for some calm and waiting for a little bit more discovery, as well as presence in the meetings and just kind of asking people for some civility and those types of things. And I think that was, in the face of that type of public scrutiny and pressure, it was very difficult to not become emotional and get dragged kind of down into that space where you can't make an objective decision around those things. And I think his ability to stay above board was really a selling point for me on that. And I totally agree with you. He'll be very difficult to replace. And I've thought about it. Several members on that board who create a stabilizing and balance to that board is difficult, but I think you'd also provide some of that same stabilizing force with what Councilperson Watson said about as we're both trying to move in the right direction as police and public safety are making steps in the right direction, that we continue to make steps forward to kind of meet in the middle on things. So I think he's an olive branch of sorts and does show the narrative and the truth that we are both moving in the right direction.
I wanted to say I would confidently step aside as co-counsel liaison if Garcia was interested in remaining with the Independent Police Oversight Commission. I wanted to say, sometimes employers or maybe appointers have a thing about liking someone in a position, so then when that person wants to step up and like do bigger or do differently, they kind of want to keep them in that other spot. And I think we should look at it differently, and that there's just even more that a person can offer because of the experience they do currently have and had and being a city council person.
Thank you.
That's a very fair point, Dana.
Further discussion.
So we do need a clear majority in order to appoint, and we could vote 2 against 2 all night, which would be a waste of all of our time. I guess my question to Mr. Bacon and Councilmember Watson, I don't know why you're Mr. and everybody else is Council, because Mayor, I don't know, I can't call you Mayor. I can, Mayor Bacon. My preference is still for Mr. Bowman, but if both of you are very set in your determination to appoint Mr. Garcia, rather than stalemate here and go 2 versus 2, I would be willing to support Mr. Garcia in terms of making this appointment and as smooth as possible.
Well, you're kind of assuming something about me, aren't you?
Well,
Not that I, I'm the pimple on the
Fair,
rear
George,
end
I
of
should-
progress around here, but, so, I think the way to determine these things is you go ahead and vote on the motion.
Yep.
That's my suggestion.
That's a great one. All right. All in favor of the motion moving forward with Mr. Garcia to City Council?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries 4-0. Next up, item 7.1, discussion of proposal for 5G small cell installation in the city.
Good evening, Council. Nicole McPherson, Acting Director of Public Works for the City of East Lansing. I'm here to really answer any questions that you have. Obviously, we've heard the concerns here in public comment. All in all, we do not have any permit applications from Crown Castle for any specific installations within the city. To give you a little basis, we do currently have 5 installations from Verizon that were installed in 2020. We have, those are 5G networks. Those are at 5 locations, Lexington, Gunson, Kedzie, Stoddard, and Collingwood within the city. Again, those were installed in 2020. There was a couple poles installed back in 2015 to where ACD did install some 4G DAS network. Those are in the area of Wildwood and Harrison, and I think there's one on Oak Ridge. But those were before any of the acts that were precipitated from the state or any of the city ordinances as well. So the ones that were installed in 2020 did follow the state's guidelines and the city's guidelines indicated in the ordinance. So we have met with Crown Castle a few different times. They came for an intro meeting at the end of maybe 2020 to just say, hey, this might be coming down the road. Again, no timeline, no definitive maps or areas. April of 22, they're coming in, they had a draft map, and it's dots on a piece of paper. It's not identifying what's going to be installed and where. We met with them in December of 22 as well, trying to get a timeline from them. Still at that time, we did not have a timeline. After we were able to get the information from some of the residents in regards to the public notice going out, we asked for a couple more meetings to be able to get a handle on what the public notice was, because we were not aware that public notice was going out for any installation because we did not have any applications for any specific locations. So with that, we moved forward with those meetings. They did the public notice to be able to meet their federal requirements for the State Historic Preservation Office. They have to go out and indicate anything that they're going to potentially locate if it is in violation of any historic sites. So that's what they were doing. We also did receive some requests for that as well in regards to those locations and a couple other ones that went to our planning department, and Peter can come up and talk to that if you want. But those are really just saying, hey, are these by any site that's registered with the State Historic Preservation Office? And if it is, this is what we go forward. If it's not, it's pretty much they're checking their box to make sure, where it lands. Peter, you may.
Hey, it's Peter Benser, Planning and Zoning Administrator for the city. First of all, these devices and related activities are exempt from zoning review. It's specific in our zoning ordinance that these small cell network. So we have a telecommunications ordinance, and within that there's a division on small cell networks, and zoning specifically exempt. As long as the pole, a resident mentioned earlier that one of the poles they're proposing is 40 feet tall. So as long as they're no taller than 40 feet, they're exempt from our review. If they propose to go taller than that, there is a special use permit requirement that kicks in. And so the only thing our office has seen are these due diligence reports, which are pretty common for a variety of industries. And it's related to if the site's contained in or on within the, items are listed in the state or national register of historic places or Indian religious sites.
I just didn't want to forget. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but
Yeah.
From a member of the audience when they were speaking on kind of it appeared to be a grandfather clause, or if you establish the footprint, are you able to? Is that a true clause? Able to expand the footprint and then expand the height of?
I made a note of that comment, and I'll have to follow up with you. I don't know the answer right now.
Thank you.
Really just on that review, it's that particular review, the Section 106 review, is really limited in scope. It's just responding factually as to whether or not an item intersects somehow with a historic site. And so we're applying to those just with the facts.
Okay, and just to follow up, so the information that we know right now is Crown Castle would like to install 54 poles within the city, based on their draft map that they provided. 60,000 linear feet of underground cable and 100,000 linear feet of overhead cable or aerial cable. To be able to do the underground and the overhead, they need a Metro Act permit, which they have applied for and has been approved. That's pretty standard for any fiber company that wants to install within the city of East Lansing or any other municipality. So with that, I will take any questions.
Because you've been very kind to me and to talk to me about this, and I just want to maybe elaborate a little bit. And in the end, Mayor, I'm going to have a suggestion here as to how to proceed, perhaps. And the city attorney may have to intercede here too. But so it was my understanding from talking to you, and I don't want to put words in your mouth. If I'm wrong, tell me. But it was my understanding that you had sort of reached out to Crown Castle and to essentially ask them to be involved, for one thing, tonight, correct? And
Correct.
they couldn't have somebody here tonight? That was the answer you got?
Correct.
Okay. And to the extent you're aware of it, that the quote, local office is Detroit?
The representatives that we met with, some were from Detroit and some were from, I think, one person was from Indiana.
Okay. And am I correct, and because I'm not sure of this, but is it your understanding that at least these proposals for these particular facilities, they Crown anticipate that Verizon is going to be utilizing them?
Correct.
Okay. So ultimately, at some level, Verizon is a player in this as well. Not that we have any control over Verizon, but maybe some customers have some control over Verizon.
Correct.
Okay. And so, did you also indicate to me that you were trying to put together some sort of a public forum at which you would want Crown to come so the public could be there and ask any questions? And have you had any success scheduling something like that?
That is correct. As part of the output meeting, or the meeting that we had with them prior to learning out that they sent public notices without us knowing it to our residents, we said, we really need you guys to hold a public meeting so people can come and ask questions. And they were amenable to that, but I have not gotten a date for them to be able to do that from them. I don't have a date from them.
So, because one of my great experiences in life is being on boards and councils in East Lansing and having the public turn out and ask me questions. So I just think that it might be a interesting process for those folks to come and have a public forum.
I feel it's very necessary.
And you're in favor of that as well, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And I want to get back to you in a second, and then Mayor, I want to get to you on this. But so, Mr. City Attorney, it's my understanding that one of the individuals in the state that's been prominent in this area is one of the attorneys at the Kitch firm in Detroit, which you and I are both very familiar with that firm. Have you had a chance to reach out to him and have any discussions with him yet?
Yes, so that's Attorney Mike Watts. I have worked with him on different right-of-way issues for a number of years, probably a decade now. I did reach out to him on this particular issue to determine if there were any municipalities who have tried to regulate at the local level, but I haven't heard back yet. However, it's my understanding there are none that have successfully tried to work within the confines of the state law. So the state law is the Small Wireless Communication Facilities Deployment Act, and its intent is to preempt local control to the large majorities. And so I am looking to see if any local communities have been successful, but the limitations, although it theoretically allows for local control, it then says it's only to the extent that the requirements are reasonable, technically feasible, non-discriminatory, technology-neutral design or concealment measures in a historic district, and it goes on. And so the limitations are highly technical and would likely make it very difficult to attempt to regulate, especially from like a physical design standpoint. But we're going to look into it, and I know that once we do get applications, certainly administration will work together to try to determine if there are ways to relocate them to more desirable spots, change the design to any degree that Crown Castle may be willing. They're the biggest player by far in the market in the country, as far as I know, but we certainly will make that attempt.
And as I understand it, and don't pretend to be an expert, but the state statute essentially is within the umbrella of the Federal Communications Commission regulations and/or statutory framework?
Yeah, that's correct. So any regulations that we would attempt to impose at the local level would have to be consistent with both the state law as well as FCC administrative regulations.
So, Mayor, what I would propose, I don't think it has to be a motion, is that the city council, with you as the signatory, write a letter to Crown and maybe also to Verizon, whoever the person would be at Verizon, inviting them to a public forum in East Lansing and maybe giving them 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 potential dates and let them, go ahead, Nicole.
I did get confirmation when they were not able to come tonight that they would be willing to come to the February discussion-only meeting.
Yeah, I'm actually talking about something else. I mean,
Yep.
I'm talking about a public forum where it's
Yep.
open, okay? So give them a range of dates or something, and then I would also, you know, if staff can put together a letter, or we can all work on it together, I think. But maybe the chief could do that starting Monday. He could get that letter ready for us. Anyway, so, but then I would just request that the city attorney follow up with Mr. Wacha, is it?
It's Watson, W-A-T-T-A.
Yeah, at Kitch to get more detail. I mean, somebody tonight used the word misnomer. I'm not satisfied that's the correct name. And then the correct, that there's something going on here statutorily which is not easily explained. And it's not magic, it's just the way the statute was written under a different legislature with a different governor. And so, which gets to my final point here, which is, obviously we have a new regime in Lansing, and I know from reading Mr. Watch's stuff that he was intimately involved in attempting to influence the legislature the last time around, and with all due respect to him, he failed with this consortium. And so I'm just wondering if that's another thing the council, after we have this forum and we have our city attorney do a little work on this, maybe educate us all, and then maybe we can look at how we might influence the legislature. You know, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know. Got a lot of people in this town that, you know, they hang around down there, so just thinking, just saying. So Mayor, I'm sorry I sort of took this over, but I just want to try to move this ahead, and I don't want, you know, I think there's a way to approach this without us getting all gummed down, and I think the residents deserve some answers. And the other thing I'd say, you know, there is a map out there that I think you've posted on the website, I think, but the reality is maybe there's a way of the council alerting the neighborhood associations. I think you're the person that goes to the neighbor presidents, and alerting them to this, because I'm sure there's going to be other neighborhoods that are going to be affected by this fairly significantly, I would guess.
And that's perfect. It actually works out because Peter will be there, so he'll be able to do that. But yeah, and definitely that we get all communication in one place. Obviously, I've received communication from the public policy side of their thing, and I really don't want, I haven't responded, frankly, because I just don't want it to be triangulated. I want us to kind of have a unified communication on how we work through this a little bit on the public policy and our, you know, everything, that we stay on the same page on this. So whatever communication we'll share, that way we get one message, because I know how that works. If you can, yeah, on the political side of things. So we'll keep it that way.
Does that sort of sound like a plan?
Yes.
Okay.
Before we move on from this, I just want to publicly state that this industry is the industry that supports my household's income. Those 2 ACD towers were project managed by my husband, and I can actually tell you those are also Verizon towers. So I'm chatting with the city attorney to find out if it would be appropriate for me to recuse myself if this comes for council action. Crown Castle is a direct competitor to ACD, and they bid on the same projects, and I don't want there to be any perception that I have prejudice either way on their project because my husband bids against them on big jobs. So just wanted to get that into the public record while we're talking about it. I don't think so either. I mean, he's not involved in these ones. I just don't want I don't want there to be any perception that I've got any prejudice either way. So wanted to get that out into the open.
Thank you.
One last thing, please. And I recognize this does not address the concerns of those in this room. The city has set up a page on the website, just 5G small cell, that we intend to use moving forward as a clearinghouse for information. So when items are received by our offices, they will be posted there. So just we want to have it all in one spot. The map's not there now, but I would imagine that's something we can add as.
Can we get it there by like the end of the week at the latest?
Yeah.
We can label this one as draft. They were supposed to send me an updated one because they had removed some locations that were on the previous map because it was, draft at that point, and I have not received that yet.
My suggestion is let's get the map we've got up, and then you can qualify it when you put it up, and
I've already sent it to a couple residents, so.
I'm sure you have. I thank you for that.
And the city's contact for this is Director McPherson, but also the Crown Castle has set up an email called lansingarea@crowncastle.com for our residents to reach out to. lansingarea@crowncastle.com, and it's on the website.
I'm sure they check that.
Yeah, well, this is our attempt.
Thoroughly and immediately.
Right, this is our attempt to try to have
Since
one
they
spot
don't
here.
seem to be able to return phone calls to Texas or wherever the hell it is.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
I had a few questions. Will the people that wrote in be able to get a response to their questions?
We can, under your direction, we can formally respond with help from the city attorney.
If that's, and I would be curious, just as well, and just to the best of your abilities, like what you can't answer. Is there a neutral person that can answer the question on property taxes? And I don't think that Crown Castle would be the people to ask. But is there a neutral person that we can ask about the property taxes being lowered when the towers are placed?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm sure that somebody may know somebody, but I'm not aware of anybody. There has to be somebody in the city that would know that.
Okay. And hopefully there can be pictures of, what towers look like in areas, because maybe we're thinking we don't want something, but maybe it's actually an okay thing to have. And sometimes seeing pictures, then you can also know, yeah, this is a good idea, or maybe, I don't want this.
Well, there's one about a half a mile from your house, behind the apartment complex, that's north
124
of
Kedzie.
Brookfield. Yeah, thank you. And I invite you, Ms. Watson, to go look at it.
Thank you.
I can say there's a very vast array of equipment that can provide this function, and it can vary dramatically site to site. So I think rather than kind of get your, I don't know, I could show you pictures of very stealthy installations that are very disguised, but then there's also kind of the other side of that as well. So I think the more important question is that Crown Castle comes prepared to show us what type of equipment they are envisioning for these sites, because that's going to be more important information, I think.
That would be included in their applications.
And do we have any idea why they pick so many towers?
When we discussed it with them briefly, they indicated each tower had about 1,000-foot or 500-foot radius, to be able to get to the next tower.
Yeah, this is now I'm using my personal knowledge here, and I might not have it 100% correct, but this is kind of the direction that cell phone technology is going in. So there will be, one kind of main tower, but then there's these repeaters, and it's specifically because of data concentration. It's not like voice calls. It's because people consume so much data on their cell phones. It's basically based on the length of the radio signal, and then they have to be picked up by another tower. So this is happening in every community in the world, actually, because that's the direction that the technology is moving in, and the density is part of the function of the equipment.
And the proposal also indicates 60 poles in Lansing. Like, it's a Lansing, East Lansing.
Are they on campus at all?
No, that's part of the 4 poles that they are removing because what they indicated is they cannot install anything on private property. It can only be within the public right-of-way.
Great. Charming.
There's no public right-of-way on campus.
On campus, yeah.
Correct.
Nice.
Further questions? Thank you so much.
Yep, you're welcome.
Thank you, Nicole.
Next up, item 7.2, traffic issues, Starbucks, 1141 East Grand River Avenue.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Council, I just wanted to let you all know, I live very close to this Starbucks, and there are periods of time where cars that are leaving the neighborhood can't get onto Grand River or can't turn off of Grand River because of the Starbucks drive-through that, and in my wording, leaks into a main two-way street. And so I asked if we could have a conversation about it.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Council. I'm Captain Chad Pride with the East Lansing Police Department. With me is one of our neighborhood resource specialists, Miss Pride as well.
I can see the family resemblance.
Yes. So today we're here to talk about the item 7.2, the traffic issues with the Starbucks at 1141 East Grand River. This problem came to us back in 2021, and at that time we had opened what we call a neighborhood resource team kit to try to solve this problem. These neighborhood resource teams consist of ELPD employees, both civilian and sworn employees, as well as encompasses other areas in the city government, including planning, our Department of Public Works, and other facets in the city government. So when we open these kits, the thing that we're trying to accomplish is when we have a problem, how do we solve that problem by utilizing everyone in the city government? So at the time we received this information, the date in which we opened this problem-solving kit was February 26, 2021. This kit has kind of reappeared its head periodically due to the traffic concerns on Stoddard, as well as sometimes East Grand River, but it also affects the businesses in that area, including Tropical Smoothie, as well as some of the residential area when people are trying to leave their homes or their apartments. So the primarily concern that we saw was usually in the morning or in the mid-afternoon, but it also varied. Nothing that was set in stone said it was a certain time. So when we looked at this kit, we looked at how could we solve this? How could we get as many people involved to make sure that this is a long-term fix and not just a short-term fix? So things that we've done so far, we've had both our neighborhood resource specialists and our parking and code enforcement officers involved with monitoring traffic and doing enforcement when the parking issues occur. We've also had our neighborhood resource specialist, our former full-time neighborhood resource specialist, Tanya Williams, did a lot of work on this kit, meeting with the store manager, the district manager, and then at one point having a conversation with a senior manager and community relations representative from Starbucks. During that time, with the meeting with the community relations representative, they came up with a plan on how they can curb so many vehicles being on Stoddard Street during these specific times. Some of the things that Starbucks brought to us was that they were going to add more labor or having more employees there during the midday to produce drinks for the method of procedure to relieve the drive-through pressure, because a lot of people were just going through the drive-through instead of going inside. They were also looking at potentially adding a handheld point of sale to increase the beverage production. Their current plan at the time, this was tentative with COVID, is to open cafes prior to fall, and that would greatly decrease the drive-through traffic. Unfortunately, when they did open up, it didn't decrease that number like we had expected. They also conducted workshops with their current employees and store managers around the drive-through production, and they were hoping that those things that they came up with were going to relieve that drive-through pressure with having all the vehicles parked on Stoddard Street. NRS Williams also reached out to Tropical Smoothie and Mr. Devin Fiddler by phone, spoke to him, and also kind of collaborated with how they can proceed to solve this issue because it was affecting his business as well. There was an email sent at one point to a regional director of Starbucks trying to figure out a meeting to set up with the Starbucks as well as Tropical Smoothie to try to figure out how they could implement new measures to curb this traffic issue. I have up here numerous photos, if the council would like. I know there is one, I don't know if it was attached to the agenda, but there's a photo of an overview of the map, but I also have photos of actual pictures that Tropical Smoothie has taken, as well as other drivers has taken, of the backup of the traffic on Stoddard Street. So if you'd like those, I can give those to you as well. So trying to set up a process to get this handled, and again, like I said, it comes and goes. We see a low for a while, we don't get as many complaints, but then it comes back. We shared the information with Tropical Smoothie about what Starbucks was planning on doing with their to try to alleviate this traffic, but again, like I said, it continued to come back as being an issue. I spoke with one of our PACE officers today who actually said that pretty much every day he monitors that or goes through that area to see what the traffic is like and take the appropriate enforcement.
Can I just start? What is the appropriate enforcement? Are we just telling cars they can't wait in line? It's not a ticket, is it? It's just kind of a move it along?
We try to move them along just to, if we can get them to, in there's signs posted in those areas for no parking. Mm-hmm. But there's nothing that states no standing or stopping.
Right.
So if they're parked, that's a different issue. But most of the time, they're just sitting there with the brakes and waiting for the line to start clearing. So
who has the power to put a traffic control order in for no standing or stopping?
So that would be our Department of Public Works. So that I kind of want to have that conversation about if that sign can be posted where it says no stopping, standing, or parking, to see if that alleviates it.
Well, it certainly gives you another enforcement
Gives us another
mechanism,
opportunity,
right?
yep.
Yeah.
So since this has reared its head again, Madison has been working on this kit, and I'll let her kind of update you on what has been going on basically since the beginning of this year.
Madison, before you jump in, is this only like the height times, like an hour, first thing, noon? Is it like
We're usually seeing them usually around 7 to 8 to 9 in the morning, and then again usually in the afternoon. But it also fluctuates. We'll see it at different times later in the evening at times too. So it's kind of hard to say it's happening at a specific time.
So as Chad indicated,
You can just move the.
Yep.
I'm a Neighborhood Resource Specialist Pride, and I've been working on this issue. I was first contacted at the very end of December of 2022 by David Bucco, who is the owner of Tropical Smoothie Cafe, and he explained that frequently the drive-through line of Starbucks is backing up to the point where it's blocking the entrance and exit of Tropical Smoothie Cafe, preventing his customers from patroning his business. And also he's having issues with Starbucks customers parking in his parking lot and then walking over to Starbucks, and that's an issue that he has spoken to Pace numerous times about, but often, since a Starbucks customer may only be parked there for 5 or so minutes, by the time Pace arrives, they've already left or they're in the vehicle and can't be ticketed. So I am working with Starbucks to try and schedule a meeting so that we can discuss this issue and talk about solutions moving forward. It seems that their current managers are unwilling or uninterested, you might say, in solving this issue, and so I've elevated it, and I'm now speaking with one of their senior managers out of Chicago, and she has been much more communicable, so I'm hopeful that she'll be able to motivate the local managers into coming to the table so we can find a satisfactory resolution.
I'm looking at the map and I just want to clarify, Tropical Smoothie is this one that on the property, and the one that's labeled with property owners is the Lowell, Marlene, and French one, so it's directly across Stoddard from Starbucks. And they have an entrance, it looks like they do not have a curb cut on Grand River, their only entrance is on Stoddard. Okay, understood. Thank you for clarifying. Well, it certainly seems like we could upgrade our signage in that area. I'm wondering if there was some way, because to me it seems like, is it no parking on both sides of the streets on Stoddard?
Correct.
Okay. Because it seems like it's when they're the biggest issue, and I did actually consider stopping at Starbucks once. I don't usually go to Starbucks, but I really wanted a coffee, and I just kept on driving because I wasn't going to wait in that line. But I guess some people really like their coffee. But it seems like it's more, the biggest problem is when people are in that northbound lane of Stoddard and then kind of treat that whole street as part of the line and then cross over the traffic.
Yeah, and the concern also is when you have that backed up traffic on Stoddard and then people want to go to Starbucks and now they start backing up Grand River, which is a highly populated street.
That is shocking to me that people would even consider that possible. Grand River is such a high-speed trunkway. I don't know. I guess I'm still surprised that people are stopped like for food pickup on Grand River and stuff too. I guess I should not be baffled by this at this point, but I still am very much. Are we getting problems from residences on the southbound lane of Stoddard that are complaining, or is it really that northbound off of Grand River that's the problem?
Yeah, it's really that northbound. The concern would be, when if you in the conversation that we've had is if that traffic was to come primarily southbound from Fry Street to Stoddard, now you're talking about blocking entrances to
driveways,
houses, driveways, parking lots, those things.
Right. Okay.
Have you talked to the owner of the property yet?
It looks like it's owned by Starbucks.
So they've talked to the property that Starbucks owns that property. From what we looked up today, it showed that it was owned by Starbucks Incorporated.
SSLLC.
Okay, because at some point it was actually both those properties were owned privately.
And right now there are two different owners, because we looked that up as well, trying to figure out if it was something that we could utilize. How could we try to help utilize maybe with Starbucks utilizing the other property if it was owned by the same person, but it's not.
And parenthetically, this demonstrates my continuing concern about drive-ins from a planning standpoint, which I think are a disaster. But I guess I'm curious as to what the original status of this site, because I think originally it was a Burger King or something like that, and then the traffic thing changed, and I actually think there was a piece of litigation with the city with the property at the Midi Enterprises, although it was owned by somebody else. But in any event, I'm just curious about whether there's a special use permit in effect for SSLLC. I'd be very interested to see if there's a special use permit in effect which has conditions, which conditions may be being violated because of this use of the drive-in. I could be wrong on that, but I think that might be something you might want to look at.
And I don't know if this is will answer that question or not, but we have notes in this kit that indicate that the city mandated 10 stacking spaces per drive-through window. This site was approved in 1983 and are essentially exempt from that requirement. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, or maybe planning can answer that.
May I speak to that,
Yeah.
please?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
So I just wanted to give a little context on this. It kind of supplemental to what the prides are sharing today.
You're a team now.
Yeah, team pride.
Netflix
So
show.
your recollection is correct, Councilmember Brookover. So this site back in 1983 was approved for a special use permit for a Burger King restaurant. I believe that, so then it actually opened, it looked like in 1985, it was completed. And so at the time, our approval, frankly, our approval letters were a little bit different. There weren't as many controls on it. So I can provide a copy of that in a communication with the challenge being, of course, that this site was approved years ago. Starbucks came along in 2007 and compelling wholesale change on the site to accommodate kind of the traffic on the site will be challenging. Not saying it's absolutely impossible, but we've had the site long-standing user. Obviously, there are some issues now, but compelling them to, because what really needs to happen is a reconfiguration of the building, a change in the business practice, like eliminating the order to go. For example, Chipotle currently has a menu system where you order on an app and just simply pick it up at the window rather than order at the window and then wait while your order is prepared. I'm not advocating for Chipotle whatsoever, but I'm just saying there are other technologies out there. So for the city to compel a significant change like that might be challenging. Certainly the approach that we're taking is appropriate, but that's kind of the backstory on how we got to now. The ownership is different. So at one time, I believe it was Jim Spanos or George Spanos, you may remember him, owned both of those properties and no longer owns the Starbucks site, but does own the property to the west. The litigation you're referring to was between the two property owners where I'm not going to speak to or characterize the relationship, but I understand it's not friendly necessarily. At one point, one of the property owners blocked access to the other side.
You've done some good research on this. If you've
I
gone
read
back
about
and
it.
figured that one out.
But it's been it has been not a. At one point, there was a cross-access and parking agreement between the two properties that no longer appears to be in force. So we don't have as many tools available to us as typically possible.
Let me ask both of you this question. So I vaguely remember that litigation, and I wasn't involved in it, but I was aware of it. And I thought one of the issues of dispute between the two landowners at that point was this, the eastern border of the Starbucks property and that ingress and egress off of Grand River, and who actually owned or controlled that ingress or egress. Because I think there was a concern at that time on the part of the city that when Spanos's, I think, maybe sold this site, the question was their original permission to be there depended on ingress and egress to their site being shared with the next site. I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah,
okay?
that was a condition of approval at
And
the time.
so I guess I just want to make sure on this map, who does actually control that westernmost drive-in that's shown contiguous to the red line, do you know? Or do you guys know?
I believe that's Starbucks. So there's two drives off Grand River, and Starbucks controls both of those. The next site, and then the access is blocked, literally blocked by parking bollards in the middle of the parking lot. And then the owner of Tasty Twist site has their own means of access off Grand River to the west.
Okay, so I guess my other suggestion in terms of problem solving is, do we still have a traffic engineer in the city? Does that position exist? Or do we have an occupant of the position?
We don't have a specific designation as a traffic engineer, but we have engineers that can look at things.
Okay, it just occurs to me that along with the special use permit stuff, which maybe the city attorney could advise us about, there's some other ways to stack here which may involve that western ingress and egress. And I'm just wondering if we have any power to suggest or require that Starbucks have a different process in terms of coming in and out. I don't know, probably not, but I think it's, going back to Ms. Watson's concerns, it's certainly worth looking at to see what weapons we have in our arsenal, I think. Can I just say parenthetically, Mayor, I'm actually glad you brought this up, Dana, because I've been getting so frustrated on these stacking things, and I realize I'm elderly, but you know, we have a similar problem on Abbott Road with, I assume it's Uber drivers or whatever. You know, the first block of Abbott is, when you turn off of Grand River, is stacked sometimes. It's a horrible traffic situation. We now have that issue, I think, down by the Graduate Hotel at certain times. I mean, so I just think there's a lot of these bottlenecks, and I'm as pro-business as anybody else, but I'll tell you, I just, it gets frustrating driving around this town sometimes and making a turn where you think there's going to be a lane open and all of a sudden you run into like 6 cars. And they stay there. That's the other thing. So maybe that's an enforcement thing, and maybe you don't have the people and everything else.
And I can add on, it probably, from a comprehensive perspective, this is a huge issue for hospitality. This comes up in every single hospitality meeting that we've ever been in around areas of parking, blocking things, the delivery, the alleys. It's kind of all one problem. And yeah, like you said, if we have someone who has some expertise in traffic, we'd be happy to submit to them and talk about these tough areas, because there's a lot of them. I agree with you.
I'm actually talking about something different. I understand the delivery thing. That's a different deal, and I've heard hospitality people talk about that. I'm actually talking about cars. And I mean, pandemic's been part of that, but the stacking of cars, people, in my judgment, thinking they have the license to essentially leave their car there for a period of time to do this, that, or the other thing. That's what I'm talking about, Mayor.
Oh, yeah. I'm with you.
May I add one thing?
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that to update a traffic control order, it would come to council first. We would draft it. It would come to council for your approval.
Thank you.
And does the traffic control include the signage that they were talking about?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. And it's too bad Starbucks comes off like they don't care and that they're selfish. Like Tropical Smoothie folks, they have to walk in. Like they don't have a drive-through, so they have to be able to park. And plus, if you live in the neighborhood and it's supposed to be a both-way street, you should be able to get on and off that street like at any time. And so I'm trying to think of the downsides if Starbucks drive-through is simply cut off to just their property. And it sounds like there's been a lot of effort to try to work with them, but it's not working out.
And one other comment, if I may, our Transportation Commission has also discussed this as well.
It sounds like there's a general interest in at least updating that traffic control order to include standing and loitering or whatever, whatever the traffic equivalent of loitering is. That seems like a fix that wouldn't impact the residents, but would give an additional tool to our PACE officers. I think that would be a definite first step and one more tool. I think I'm sympathetic to negotiating with managers who might not be very long in their positions and might not feel a great loyalty to either their customers or their corporation and their interest in solving complicated problems. But I hope that the corporate office is more responsive. But it seems like, I feel like there's a general consensus from council that updated traffic control order would be appropriate.
Yeah, I think my perception is that you guys have great latitude here to try to find a solution or solutions. It sounds like we're going to need to get this squared away, and you'll have support of council with whatever combination of solutions you bring back. I think there won't be any pushback on that. So, yep.
Ready to elevate.
Yep. Any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. And before we adjourn, I'll take a point of privilege right here. From the beginning of this meeting, I'll be putting some time on the schedule if anyone wants to talk offline around the impact of today's decisions. It'll be confidential, and it could be anything unrelated to obviously the agreements or anything along those lines, but I will be happy if you reach out and want to have any discussions or conversations around how impact to your departments or anything along those lines, or even just from a personal perspective. I'll be happy to take those meetings, and I'm probably I'm going to just place some time on calendars, and I'll have Tammy send it out broadly, and I'll be somewhere. I'll just sit there, and so you don't have to schedule or do anything there. I'll be present and just to be present if anyone wants to talk or discuss anything, any disruption or anything from that perspective. So thank you for that. With that, meeting adjourned.